Hi, guys. Welcome back to the That's Where I'm At podcast today. I have Alyssa. Alyssa, welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, Laura. I'm so happy to be here.
So, guys, Alyssa is the founder and clinical director of the Collective Therapy and Wellness. And Alyssa, I'm so excited for you to talk to us. We were talking earlier about generational cycles, boundaries, and all the things, breaking the generational patterns. And this is right up my alley. So I'm so excited to talk about that. So tell me how you got into doing this line of work.
Absolutely. So there's a long version and a short version, so I'll try to combine the two.
You can do the medium version.
Yeah. Um, my own healing journey began in my 20s after a significant loss of a family member.
Mm.
And, I grew up in a house where nobody talked about anything, right? It was kind of like the messaging growing up for me was, staying quiet. And the big thing was don't start any drama, keep it to yourself.
Yeah.
And so I really never had a space where I could you know, identify what it was that I was feeling or
Yeah.
what my experience was. It just kind of felt wrong to do that. And so in my early 20s, I did, my own healing. I went to therapy and I found the words, right? And the space to be able to
Yeah.
explore what is going on and what am I feeling? And that was so empowering for me in so many ways
Yeah.
because it spilled out into like being able to express myself in relationships and set boundaries and it really changed my life. And I wanted to be able to offer that to other people because I could see how
Yeah.
many people really also were not doing that, especially like family members, right?
Right.
So, um,
I wanted to talk on that. I'm like,
yeah.
already I resonated with you. We had well, I think also my parents were born in the 30s, so it's like they probably have some stuff they didn't deal with. And then we had a major family event happen when I was a child, and it's like we didn't talk about it. And I also think that my parents didn't have the tools to talk about it.
Right.
And I think it was the everybody just kind of be good, get good grades, like don't like cause drama, like you said, because they probably couldn't handle it. They were probably so dysregulated from it and didn't know how to deal with what I mean, it was a major thing. And I don't even know how people deal with it now. Now I'm not going to get into it, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the trauma is. And
Right.
so I resonate with that. It's like what I want to talk about things. Can't
Right.
wait, how to process it because you don't know if it's a normal feeling or not. Should I be
Mhm.
upset about this or not? So instead I went inside and I kept it to myself and
Right.
you know,
Or even a common one is like, do other people feel this way? But like,
yeah.
why do I feel this way if no one else does, right? Because no one else is talking about it.
Yes.
Everybody else is kind of just saying, just dismissing or maybe even belittling or invalidating. So,
Yeah.
why is it that I feel this way and other people don't, right?
Yeah, it's almost that don't talk about it because that'll make so and so upset or whatever. I mean,
Well,
I've heard that. I heard that up until a few years ago, just listening to people say like, "Well, don't talk about that because that makes so and so cry." And it's like,
but
there's
I'm
nothing
already,
there's
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with crying. Like, it's okay. We can be upset. Yeah, I like that. That's why I was, coaching somebody yesterday saying you have to tell your kids something about your divorce and make it age appropriate, or they're going to fill their own heads with their own story. They're going to make something up and it might be wrong and it might be damaging. They might create their own story. So tell them something.
Absolutely. Yes. And that's exactly true. Like when we're kids and we don't really have the cognitive ability yet to see beyond our own little experience, when something
Yeah.
doesn't make sense, we do tend to, it's a human need for things to make
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
So, we don't fill it with butterflies and
Right.
rainbows. We fill it with because it doesn't feel good. So of course we're going to fill it with something that doesn't feel good. And more often than not, because our minds are egocentric, right? That saying of like the world doesn't revolve around you,
Yeah.
but it does.
Right.
From the
It
time that
does.
you're like
Yeah.
born up until like mid 20s, our minds are egocentric,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, the way that kids will internalize things is that it's me, it's my fault. I did
Right.
something,
Right.
right?
And so you didn't see family members talking about this or doing the work when you went and got therapy or something, or started doing the work somehow in your 20s?
Yeah, yeah. And then, that morphed into I want to be able to offer this to other people because it
Yeah.
was so empowering. It was so validating. It made sense to me, like why certain things bothered me. It was really very helpful in terms of like helping me figure out who I am, who I want to be in the world. And then the journey to like what I do now and finding my niche was
Hmm.
it really began after grad school. And it's quite funny because when I was in grad school, I said to myself, I am never going to do family therapy. Not going to happen. I belong.
Famous last words.
Right, right. I was like, I belong to my own family. I know how complicated that is. I'm just not going to go there, right? And then my first job, my first placement outside of grad school was family therapy.
That's so funny.
It's so funny.
I have a degree in education, and I always said, oh, the people who do special education, I could never do that. And
Mhm.
guess what? Then my son was born with special needs. So
Yeah.
it's like, guess what? You get to do it anyway, and it's, but I just think like we just make it work, and like if you start loving it, it just
Yeah.
happens and it's okay. Like for me, then I went back to school, got a degree in special in speech therapy, and it's like I'm just going to go help kids like my son. And so it's
Yeah.
just funny, famous last words.
Right, exactly. And that's the best part is I've never looked back. I fell in love
That's
with the
awesome.
whole aspect of the family system and early social learnings and the dynamic of the early relationships and how that
Yeah,
translates into relationships beyond your family of origin.
yeah,
And so then I quickly realized like even if you're working with an individual, you're never not working with the family dynamic. So
right.
and I love it. It's almost giving an opportunity, even if I'm working with an adult, which I do, I only work with adults now.
Hmm.
Um, you're always kind of working with that inner child that was not
Yeah,
seen and not validated. But
yeah,
it's turned into now I'm the adult that
mhm,
doesn't validate myself, right? That
right.
doesn't myself, rejects myself. So, um, it's really very powerful to be able to offer somebody experience that they never had, you
Yeah.
know.
How I've done the inner child work, but I come across a lot of people who haven't done that or don't even know what that is. So talk about that a little bit and what that may look like as we're walking through the world as an adult, and then
Mhm.
how they can do some of that healing, or at least begin doing some of that healing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what it comes down to is, we all have these early social learnings that begin in our family, right? So if we break it down to like, what does that actually mean?
Hmm.
We our self-talk, right? Or the
Hmm.
way we even talk about others or the world around us is very much influenced by the language that's used in front of us, modeled in front
Yeah.
of us, said to us,
Yeah.
right? And that becomes the framework in which we define our experience, the way we
Mhm.
see ourselves, the way we see other people. So in that sense, there's all these belief systems that form early on. And those belief systems then influence the way we relate to each other, right? The
Yeah.
way we relate to ourselves. And because we're wired for survival, we develop these protective mechanisms or
Yeah.
defense mechanisms when our
Yeah.
needs are not met. We find a way to meet them. And sometimes that's a matter of, you know, maybe I've had to perform, right? And perform well in order to feel loved and
Hmm.
accepted, right? I
Hmm.
had to people please in order to,
Hmm.
have a sense of mattering in my family dynamic, right? And
Yeah.
that works. So then we take it with us as
Yes.
we leave our family of
Right.
origin.
Yeah.
And it actually stops working because we're no longer in that dynamic, but then we recreate it in our
Yeah.
adult lives. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, I guess, the background of how it works.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it begins with a little bit of like insight, and then it's a sense of like creating safety through the experience in therapy with the
Hmm.
therapist that
Yeah.
I can let go of that protective mechanism. And then also building trust and safety and security within, which is more of an internal mechanism of like, switching out of survival mode and into
Hmm.
self-loyalty, which is like, I realize that's a big undertaking. So it's one step at a time, beginning
Right.
with insight and beginning with, calming the nervous system and then exploring these
Um,
beliefs. So,
I love that. I talk about all of that, with my clients, and it's so important because listen, when I started People always ask me, like, what's the one thing? I'm like, there's not one thing. If you want the one thing, it's going to be boundaries, but boundaries go hand in hand with self-love. And if you don't love yourself, you will never change. You will never do anything, especially if you have those people around you. It doesn't matter if it's friends, family, and it's usually like what, like you said, what we learned in our family system.
Mhm.
If you don't know how to love yourself in spite of that, you're never going to do the boundaries because boundaries changed my life. But first, I had to start loving myself. I didn't even know what boundaries were. I was never taught boundaries. And I think when I look back, and I'm sure you've experienced this, those people that you ask for something, your basic wants and needs or something, and they call you difficult. They tell
Mm.
you you're being too much and needy. It's like, oh, I was just trying to set a boundary and they weren't having it. So
Mhm.
that's definitely something I had to learn how to do and heal that inner child who I think wasn't loved the way I wanted to be loved because everybody was in survival mode.
That's exactly it, right? Like the parent who's burnt out, the parent who is in survival mode because that was passed on from their generation. And then
Yes.
we've got all these life stressors, and
Hmm.
finances is often a big one, or maybe there's conflict in the marriage, or all of this, compounds. And it's a matter of needing to find a way to make through it and to get through it. And if your child maybe at that time was like having a meltdown or a big emotion,
Hmm.
there's a sense, I think, for a lot of parents that are in survival mode of like, all right, stop, just stop, knock it
Yeah.
off, right? Put your shoes on, we
Right.
gotta go. And it's an easy place to slip into at times, even as a parent,
Hmm.
especially if you're rewiring as a parent your own childhood experience. And so, yeah, it comes from that. It's based on other people's stuff. And you bring up a good point when it comes to boundaries, because boundaries are really a lot of things. Like they exist in a lot of ways. We have the external boundaries, right, which are the ones that you can see,
Hmm.
physical space from someone else. It could also be boundaries around money, boundaries around what's acceptable behavior. Those are things that
Hmm.
you more so see. But then we have the internal boundary of like being able to separate someone else's responses
Yeah.
from how you view yourself and your own self-worth. And that's
Yes.
almost like putting a veil up, right? Um,
Yes. I love
but
that.
then being able to not let someone else's behavior pierce the veil, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I have people that I still talk to that will say, like, this is what he said to me. And like, I'm putting myself in their shoes and I'm thinking, I wouldn't even react to that. And they're like, that really like hurt me. And I was like, that's not even true what he said about you. Like I
Mhm.
understand because like dealing with a lot of people with narcissism, it's like, yeah, they're just saying things to try and hurt you. But if we even believe a portion of it, it's working. And so I was just talking to a friend. I was like, I wouldn't even react to that because it's not true what he said. And that's the part that I had to heal because this is my twisted thinking. If someone said I was difficult, then I must be difficult and I had to work on being difficult. That was my whole thinking. So if someone said I was whatever, I had to work on that because they wouldn't say it unless I really was.
Right.
So that was a lot to unravel for sure.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, the other, I mean, you can really, I think, tell. I love talking about this stuff because
Yeah.
it's so interesting how truly like something like that doesn't stick or pierce the veil unless there's some sort of vulnerability that
Yeah.
like is pre-existing. And a common thing I often say is like you can't light a match, right,
Yeah.
just by holding it in your hand. It
Wow.
has to rub up against something. So when something sticks, right, and it
Yes.
kind of really brews inside and we start to ruminate
Yes.
or change our behavior, right?
Hmm.
Or even self-sacrifice or contort ourselves into all these shapes to be different so that we're
Yeah.
more agreeable. It's a way to, we think, like, find love, right? If I do
Right.
this, this person will love me. And because that's a human need, is to
It
feel like
is. Yeah.
belong.
Right.
But there's a pre-existing vulnerability, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
when you think of trauma, that's what really caused, like, that's why trauma happens is there's a pre-existing vulnerability, acute event. and then lack of support after.
Right.
So that's kind of how this stuff gets stuck at times. And it's hard to break
It's
through.
it is, and I like that you talked about that with trauma because I heard somebody talking about that, on the internet, so of course it's true. So, but I that it's not the trauma itself or the event itself, it's that lack of support. It's that no one believing you or no one's there to let you talk about it. Those things, I'm like, that's so true because you think about people who have been through similar experiences and they're just like, la, 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 it's okay. And maybe they're not, who knows if they're burying it, but say they're not, say they're like, no, I don't care that, like, I'm over that. And I'm like, oh, because
Mhm.
I didn't have a lot of support at the beginning. And so to me, I think it made it hard. It took a little while. I had to build my own community because I didn't find it around me.
Mhm.
So I like that idea of an emotionally safe place for people to say, like, this is my trauma. So now that I've created that so people can talk about their trauma.
Yeah, and it's so needed, right? Because that's the other thing is like, I think especially when you look at like older generations where it
Yeah.
very much was about survival and the emotions were kind of at the back end and we don't really need to pay attention to that, or emotions are bad. That was kind of like the
Yeah.
older view of some of this stuff. When we think about what sticks for one person, right? There's a pre-existing vulnerability, an acute event. When we think about like what sticks for everybody, it's sometimes different things because the
Yeah.
vulnerability is different for all of us. So we don't know what's gonna be the sticking point for
Right.
one another. So
Yeah.
talking about it, having a space is really important.
Right. So talk about some of the things we talked about before was like, what's a family map? Tell me a little bit about that. Hold on. Let's
Yeah.
take a beat because I don't want that in there. Just cut that part out. You're going to talk about the family map. So, okay, we'll take a beat. Okay.
Okay. Family map. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know how I should ask that, but I don't want this part in the show. I just wanted to ask you about the family map.
Okay, all right. So how I do my work with my clients, really like beginning, first session, really. I
Hmm.
do my intakes a little bit differently. My intake paperwork is where I ask you all of like, what medications are you on? Do you have a primary care doctor?
Hmm.
What are have you ever tried therapy before? Those kinds of questions, that are more, I guess, yes or no or specific.
Okay.
But after that, when it comes to, really beginning therapy, I'll do what's called a genogram, right? And a genogram is very similar to what's a family map, I guess.
Okay.
And it starts with, tell me about what childhood was like. And I actually draw a picture, right? Like, do you have any siblings? What was mom and dad's relationship
Hmm.
like? And then we get into all of the intricacies of what daily life looked like. And then what are the themes of the family, the story of the family, the
Yeah.
patterns of the family? What role did you play in the family?
Hmm.
How well did that work? What were the responses from the adults or caregivers around you? Did you experience a lot of transition, a lot of loss? And we think
Yeah.
about that, then we take that and then we think about like, okay, what's going on now that you're wanting some help with?
Yeah.
How does that relate to what's going on now? And it very often does. Very, very often
Yes.
does. So it helps us uncover what are some of these things that are from the past that
Hmm.
are potentially inadvertently being recreated,
Hmm.
or that we're still kind of stuck in and it's just no longer working,
Yeah.
right? How can we
Yeah.
heal some of that in order to move forward in a way that feels more healthy or more aligned with who you truly are,
Yeah.
in a more empowering way? And so when we look at like our childhoods, like what was my experience like growing up,
Mhm.
it really does influence the story that we have about ourselves and who we need to be and who we've been in the world.
Yeah. As I was doing work and I saw like people like going like, oh, Laura with boundaries doesn't work for me kind of thing. And then, people move out of your life and I think the wrong people move out and the right people move in, or they're already there and you start seeing them. And I was talking to my coach, who's also my friend, and she said, that's the part that trips people up and where they give up is because they're starting to see the quote unquote negative side of healing because we're doing the work, but it's having a negative effect on people around us who liked us the other way. Or, does
Mhm.
that make sense? Because,
Yeah.
I see that with my family's system, who I was. And then as I started changing, it was really confusing to them.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
was hard. It was hard. I don't know why I don't know why Zoom has to give us a thumbs up, but okay, thanks, Zoom. But it was really hard to say, like, no, this is what I'm doing. Because they would say, like, why are you saying that? Or why are you thinking that way? And I would say, no, I'm healing that stuff. This isn't working for me anymore. And that was a really hard discussion. So, do you find that it kind of trips people up when they are starting to have that negative? I think it's considered a negative reaction, but and then in the long run, it's good though.
Yeah, well, because it's disorienting, it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes there's this hope or wish, which we have as like
Yeah.
really framed as an expectation, right? If I
Yeah.
do this thing, I'm going to get this result, right?
Yeah.
We focus on the outcome that we want. And when we're making the change and doing the thing and we don't get that outcome or that wish is not fulfilled, it's like,
Yeah.
oh, it's not working, right?
Yeah.
Um, and yes, and if you think about it in terms of like your family, your loved ones that have known you for all these years,
Yeah.
they have gotten used to you being the way that
Mhm.
you are, not confronting, maybe not sticking up for yourself or
Right.
not speaking up. So now all of a sudden when you do, there's a sense of like, what
Right.
are you doing? Right? You're being
Right.
difficult, right? Why
Yes,
are you
that's
being
exactly it. Yep.
difficult? Um, and so what that can do is it rubs up right against like again that childhood experience of when it was
Yeah.
uncomfortable and
Yeah.
where you learned I have to be this way in order to survive, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it'll bring up discomfort, and that's what I think we tend to run from,
Yeah.
right? We prefer ease and comfort, of course,
Yeah.
'cause it feels more safe. But ultimately, having all of our emotions and our experiences is what is truly, truly empowering. And you might say,
Mhm.
listening to me saying that, like, how so?
Right.
But the truth is like, you can't really know happiness
Yeah.
unless you allow yourself to feel sadness,
Yeah.
right? And vice
That's so good.
versa, right? Every
Yeah.
emotion stands for some sort of need that is going unmet, right? Like
Yeah.
anger is valid, but we're told, nope, don't be angry,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And there's different versions of that depending on how you identify or your gender, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're angry and you're a woman, you're a bitch, right? If you're
Right.
angry and
Hmm.
you're a man, then you're aggressive and violent.
Hmm.
But anger is so valid. It
Yes.
stands for something, unfair that you've
Mhm.
experienced, something
Yeah.
unjust, and that deserves space. But we're not taught how to have our anger. So
Right.
we're not taught how to stick up for ourselves because anger is the thing that says, this is not okay, right?
Right.
And that's where boundary setting comes in.
Yes. That's exactly it. Let me tell you, I was a very angry person until I got divorced. Amazing how when you're not actively in abuse that you're not so angry anymore. So I really, when I was first, okay, like most of my life, I was really angry and I hated everything around me and until I got sick of myself. But I used to say in anger, I don't know how I gave you guys permission to treat me like crap, but I somewhere along the way I did. And that was me voicing that I didn't understand I needed boundaries. I was
Mhm.
just angry and I didn't know what it was. I'm like, I don't understand why everybody treats me like this. So, boundaries for a people pleaser, I thought I was having to tell people what to do.
Mhm.
But the game changer was when I found out it was me and my choices. And I was like, what? I can do that? Because, I'm the parentified, eldest daughter, and I just didn't ruffle feathers and I went into my marriage the same way and just let him do whatever because it was familiar. And so
Mhm.
I didn't know how to set boundaries, but man, I learned how.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I did. I learned like, well, he sent me to therapy because something was wrong with me. So, but that's where I found my voice. And that's why I love therapy so much because it really helped me unlock all of that and understand the generational patterns and what was serving me and what wasn't serving me. And
Mhm.
that's why I'm so love talking about it, love telling people, Sometimes I just like that's my first thing out of my mouth. Have you been to therapy? I feel
Yeah,
kind of bad, but it's so good.
it really is. I mean, imagine just having a space where you can finally talk and someone
Yeah,
can hear your point of view and wants to know your point of view.
yeah,
And, I think that's what's really special is like when I think about the work that I do, it's such a privilege, right? And what I mean by that is not in a sense of social justice or anything like that. What I mean is it is an honor. It's an
yeah,
honorable position to have where I get to offer somebody a sense of like, tell me your experience. I
yeah,
want to hear it, right? That's something that you might not have ever had before, right?
yeah,
And I want to be able to offer you the exchange of like being heard, right? And
yeah.
then there's a lot of intricacy from there in terms of
Mhm,
like what we do, but we're building a relationship together that is very different
mhm.
from potentially any other relationship you've ever had.
Yeah,
And hopefully, right, where I can
yeah.
offer you a sense of feeling seen.
And
So,
and it's such a safe place because and that's what I want people to hear. It's like if you don't feel safe or you don't feel like you're having a conversation, because I like the conversational, sometimes people say like they just ask me how I'm feeling about that and they don't give me any tools. And I'm like, okay, that's not the right therapist for you. If you want tools or if you want to have a more of a back and forth about it. We had we brought our son home from college for drugs and alcohol, and he knows I tell that story. And so that's what sent me to therapy because I wanted to go and talk about how angry I was about that. And at home, again, the anger was not allowed. Like it's the same pattern I took into my marriage. And it's like, you can't be mad.
mhm,
And I was like, but I am mad. So I didn't want to shove it down because I saw what it did in my family when we shoved it down and poured alcohol on top of it. That didn't work in my family. That's what I was shown. And I was like, I have to change this. And so that's when I started going. And I've had such a safe place to say, I hate this, what's
mhm.
happening right now. And I felt safe because that person across from me was not like, oh, you can't say that. They were like, yeah, that sounds
Makes
horrible.
sense.
It makes of course you're mad, so
Right.
yeah. So I just love it.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really very special work to be able to do.
Hmm.
And to be able to offer somebody. So I really can't. I mean, there are days where then I've had 6 sessions in a row, some
Yeah.
small breaks in between, and there's a lot of heaviness or a lot of trauma or
Yeah.
a lot of sadness, and you think about any other job. Truly, like for a
Right.
second, you think about any other job. It's often the case that it's not 6 hours straight,
Yes.
5 days a week of emotion, heavy emotion and
Hmm.
pain
Hmm.
that, to the extent of like, wow, this is possible for any human to experience,
Yeah.
right? There's no real separation from potentially what I could go through, right? So that's
Right.
where therapists can become vicariously traumatized, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no space for sometimes the other side, very minimal at times, right?
Right.
As much as like yes, there are those days, I can't imagine really doing anything
I
else. It would
know.
somehow creep in.
It would. I think you'd be at out to lunch with a friend and I mean, I think as women we're very nurturing that way anyway. So,
Yeah.
and all of my really healthy friends who have been through therapy, that's how we talk to each other. Sometimes we're like, "Nope, this is an old way of thinking. Why are you still thinking like that?" And, I have a great group text. I'm like, I'm in a bad place right now." And they're pulling it right out. We get right to the point.
Yeah.
It's really great to that's why I always talk about like when you get healthy, like the healthy people start coming around because you don't want to be around people who, yes, I have just casual friends, but I don't have friends who are unhealthy, who are
Mhm.
like saying unhealthy things or living unhealthy lives. And I mean that, mental health. So it's been great to kind of change my entire circle, really. And it happened all just by accident and it happens in the flow as you're doing the healing. So it's good to break that those patterns for sure. When you're working with people, I don't know if there's a tip or something you could give the listeners for
Mhm.
something they could even think about today. as they're driving or listening to this.
Yeah. So I want to kind of give two,
Yeah.
right? The first one is, and tips are great, strategies and tools and skills, very important, right? That's
Yeah.
the how. That's the, how do I, build the house, right?
Right.
Um, and needed and necessary. Now, here's this piece of it that we sometimes get stuck in. I think we live in a in a world that is full of instant gratification. So we focus
Yes.
sometimes very much on the skills, right? And the
Mhm.
change that we want to have
Yeah.
out of a sense of, I don't like this feeling. I need it to go away. So what do I need to change? What do I need to fix? How do I fix it?
Yeah.
And consider for a second, right, that some of that like urgency,
Mhm.
right, or frustration is about, I don't want to feel this,
Yeah.
right? We have to feel it sometimes. We have to feel the burn a little bit in order to and to have that anger, right? Or to have
Yeah.
the sadness to
Yeah.
really make the change, right? So consider that it's okay, right? That to be a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not talking about safety here, right?
Right.
Obviously,
Right.
it
Hmm.
matters, but give yourself some grace around timeline, right? Know that urgency is a matter of like fear. I don't like this feeling.
Yeah.
And it might take some time, and that's okay, right? So
Hmm.
that's about expectations. It might be a wish for this to go away right now.
Yeah.
It's okay if it doesn't. It deserves space to be experienced and
Hmm.
felt and grieved, right?
I love that.
And
Yeah.
you need that first. So if you think about it this way, here's a metaphor, and then it leads right into the other one that I'm
Okay.
going to give is you can have the sharpest tool in the shed, right? You can have this really amazing saw or drill with all these cool drill bits and it's shiny and all these things. But if there's a bunch of shit in the way, right,
Yeah.
in front of that tool, you're not going to be able to access the saw or the drill or the
I love
whatever.
it. Yeah.
So, right, like that's what I mean about sometimes you have to be in the fire of it or the
Yeah.
discomfort of it in
Yeah.
order to access the tool because everybody is skilled. That's the thing. You already have some of these abilities within you, but consider that there's stuff that makes it hard in the moment to access it. We have to
Yes.
deal with that first,
Yeah.
right?
I love that.
Um, so then the other piece of it, which is a metaphor that I love, and we have in a 21-day free email like campaign that you can sign up for through our website. And it's a journey that is meant to help you set healthy boundaries and increase
Mhm.
your sense of self-worth. So this metaphor is just, I love it. It's amazing. So, okay, the framework for it is built on this idea that we all need to feel like we belong somewhere. That's a human need, right up against eating
Yes.
and
Yes.
warmth and clothing, right?
Hmm.
um so the thing to consider is that we belong to ourselves long before we
Hmm.
belong to anyone else,
Love
right?
it. Yes.
So if you consider that your body, your space, your finances, your heart, your mind, right, is like your home. And then you think about your actual physical space that you have,
Hmm.
right? Your home, whether it's your room inside a home, whether it's an apartment, or even if you don't own a home yet, right? Or
Hmm.
you don't like the home that you're in right now, because that's the reality.
Yeah.
You might have a vision of what you want your home to look like, feel like, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You get to pick the paint colors. You get to pick whether there's curtains or pillows or what kinds of pillows or decorations. Like you get to decide what this home looks like and feels like. You get to decide who comes in, how far and how far they're allowed into your home, right? Who gets to just kind of be on the doorstep and you wave, and maybe who you maybe pretend you're not home for, right?
Yes.
Um,
I love that.
or, or even like who gets to come inside your bedroom, right? Like and go through your dresser drawers. Maybe that's a sister that's gonna bring back like your clothes that they're
Yeah.
borrowing,
Yeah.
right? You get to decide all of those things. You get to decide how long they stay, what is appropriate behavior inside your home, right? And so if you can do that in your physical space, you can do that with your heart and with your mind,
I
right?
love
So
that.
it's a matter of what am I, trying to create for myself, for my life? What am I worth? What do I want in
Mhm.
my life? What do I want more of? And what do I want less of? So first deciding upon that and getting really clear and
Amazing.
confident in that what you want is um, worthy, that you
Okay.
are worthy of what you want is probably a better way of saying what I'm
Yeah.
trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, then we can start setting those boundaries, but not until you're really clear and confident.
Yes, amazing. It's so true. And that's every time I just love that whole thing. I love that whole thing. And it so goes along with my experience of I couldn't set boundaries until I loved myself. I just couldn't. I had to work on that first. That was the first thing when I walked out of my divorce was I felt so low. I'm like, I got to work on I have to love me. I'm the love of my life. I have to love me,
Mhm.
and that was the biggest thing. And so I had already started setting boundaries, but man, boundaries like really took off and I really understood them once I actually loved myself and understood, like, I was clear on what I wanted and didn't want. I i love that. I will be signing up for that because that just sounds amazing. So
Yeah. Yeah. So
uh
every day you get a prompt for a different version of that metaphor, right?
I love
The
it.
lock, the windows, the foundation, blueprint. Um, so yeah, I'm very excited about it because I don't know, it was a metaphor that became very, very clear the more I used it. And I was like, this is great.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so good. No, it's so true. I love that. Like, who you're not home for or who you actually open the door for.
Right.
Maybe you don't open the screen door. You talk to them through the screen. I love that. I think that'll be really helpful for people for sure. So, okay, well, that might be a good place to end because I thought that was great. That was a great ending. But is there something else that you would like to share with everyone before we say goodbye?
Yeah, it's actually to piggyback off of something you said,
Okay.
which is, loving yourself, right, is the key. And if we really think about it, right, those behavior patterns, right, those protective mechanisms like
Yeah.
people pleasing, like performance-based love, right,
Yeah.
like diminishing parts of yourself to make others happy, all of those things, right? We've got all got different versions of it. The reason why those patterns and behaviors formed in the first place was out of a desire for connection and love,
Hmm.
right? So ultimately, we're engaging with them to feel loved and to feel as though we matter, right? So that's the quest that has always been in place.
Yeah.
And that's why it begins with first deciding like you are worthy of love. You
Mhm.
always were,
Yeah.
right? And those protective mechanisms or patterns really were about, stem from a child who didn't know any other way of how to get
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
That's good. It touches my heart. No, it's good. It really is. It's really good. It's such good work. I'm so thankful that you shared all this with us today. And I know, I just thought it was really great. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah.
And we'll
So
put it all in the show notes as well.
perfect. So we are on social media. We're not as active, but we're working on it. We're
Okay.
getting there. I think really the best place to reach us because that's where all of our services, our little like freebies and links to other things. And we've got a lot. We've got a library of resources. We've got,
Awesome.
recorded meditation. So the best hub, I think, to reach us on is our website.
Hmm.
You can sign up for our newsletter and things like that. So it's www.collective-therapy. So that's collective-therapy.com.
Okay, great. And we'll put all that in the show notes. We'll put all your stuff, even your social media, if you want. So,
Yeah, of course, of course. We're working on it. We're getting more active nowadays.
okay. That's okay. No, I mean, my website, I know people follow me on social media. I'm like, my website, I'm like, I have so much stuff on my website. You guys go over there. Like
Yeah.
that's where all the stuff is. Yeah, there's always something to help. So, Alyssa, thank you so much for being here and for everything you're doing to help us break the generational patterns and to heal those parts of us. So, I really appreciate you being here. And guys, if anything resonated with you today, will you please feel free to leave a review? Give us 5 stars. That's how we can keep doing this work. And please go connect with Alyssa and, go on social media, tell us you love us, all those things. So, Alyssa, thanks again for being here.
Thank you, Laura.
Yeah. So one of the things was doing all this work, caused a rift in my family of origin because I completely changed as a person. Like I am no longer that person. I don't even recognize myself 3 years ago. I'm a completely different person because I have boundaries, and that's not who I used to be. I was very much a doormat and walked all over, and I had a place in the family system, and I
Mhm.
wasn't willing to continue with that.
Yeah. Well, and it's very common because here's the thing is that when you stop participating in the whoever you are, stop participating in the family system in the way that people have known you to act or behave, one piece of it is that by you contorting yourself, right, to fit, it
Mhm.
enables sometimes other people in the family dynamic to also not have to feel their emotions, right?
Right,
So
right,
when you set up a boundary and you're no longer consuming that and owning it, now
Mhm.
it's just in the space and
Right.
it can't be ignored anymore. And again, we all run from our emotions, right? If they're painful, if they're heavy, if they don't make sense. So it starts to get uncomfortable for the people who maybe would
Yeah,
project it outward because it has nowhere to go.
yeah. And it was almost like, and I saw this in friendships too. I never said anything. I never said, like, you have to go to therapy. You need to start doing things better. Never said any of those words ever. But I think that they internalize that almost like, do I need to step up my game? Do I need to do something different? And so, like, friendships fractured and
Mhm.
things changed because I
But-
never once said you had to do anything. But this
Right.
is
Well,
this.
it could have made the other person feel like, well, you've abandoned me all of a sudden, right? But
Right.
that's their stuff, right? And
That's
if
their
you're
stuff.
always, yeah, and if you're always the one to kind of save,
Yeah.
right? Then they don't have to feel their stuff and make the changes. So that's why it's okay to feel your emotions because and even if they're uncomfortable,
Hmm.
right? But because we resist them, it turns into all this other stuff. It gets
Yeah.
even messier, and we're
Yeah.
not as in control as we're trying to be at the end of the day.
Yeah. But listen, I just feel so, I feel this, I feel light rather than heavy all the time.
Mhm.
Because when I had to quote unquote control everything and make sure I didn't say the wrong thing or make sure I was following all the rules, it was constant anxiety, heaviness. And now I just like I go through the world. This is who I am. I don't go through the world running people down. I go through the world with who knowing who I am with joy and happiness.
Mhm.
And that doesn't work for everybody. And that's okay. And that's okay because the people who are around me are the people who are supposed to be there.
There you go.
Okay, this is going to be the intro to Alyssa's episode. If you could put this at the beginning. Hi, guys. Welcome back. Today I'm talking to Alyssa. I just talked to her. We had an amazing conversation, and she's a therapist. And so I loved it because it was like me having a therapy session. I always love that. But she was talking about breaking generational patterns, what how our childhood patterns get us into relationships that then feel familiar, our place in our family, and how setting boundaries and loving yourself go hand in hand. And that that's something that I love to talk about because I know that if you don't love yourself, you're never going to be able to set boundaries. So we talked a lot about that. And she was just great to talk to. I could have talked to her forever. So if you are interested in connecting with her, you are going to, okay, well, take that part out. Cut it at, you're going to love her. She was just great to talk to. And I know you guys are going to enjoy this episode. So here you go.